Hey everybody, it's Rob here from Rob and Jonas's Filmmaking Tips. Sometimes we do photo tips like we're doing today. And in part, the reason that we're doing that is we do a lot of time lapses in our videos. Lightroom is an essential tool for people who do time lapses, which go into video. So I'm going to be walking you through my basic workflow. In particular, I'll be showing you landscape photography techniques in Lightroom. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this photo submitted by Francesco, which is a picture of the Alps, and I'm going to be turning it into something like this. And so there's a very simple workflow I'm going to walk you through. I'm on a timer, so I can't be too long, so I'm just going to show you what I'm doing, and at the end, I'm going to show you some tips in Photoshop. Okay, so first things first, I open up Lightroom. Now what I'm going to do is going to go to my Finder. I'm going to take Francesco's raw photo, and I'm going to bring in Francesco's copy. Okay, now this will allow me to start working with it. So you're in the Library tab. I'm going to go over to the Develop tab while I've clicked on this particular photo. If you were out in the field and you were taking this photo, I think Francesco did a great job here. I don't know if he was trying to do this or not, but essentially you can see down here at the bottom, it's a little bit dark. Up here at the top, it's a little bit light, and you can go over here to the histogram and you can see that. Fortunately, there's enough detail over here in the shadows, and there's enough detail in the lights that we can kind of bring everything into the middle a little bit. And that's what I'm going to do. So let me just show you my workflow. First thing I do is I take the highlights and I bring them all the way down, and I take the shadows and I go all the way up. Actually, they don't need to go all the way up, just a little bit up. Some people don't like to do that, but I like to do this, and I think that this is just how I do it. I'm sharing it simply with you. And then what I do is I go to the whites and the blacks. Now, this is kind of a fun thing to do. If you hold down Option, and you take the white slider, and you move it up and down, you can see that right here, at this point, I'm starting to blow out the white, so I'll stop. And I can do the same thing with the blacks, and I can bring it down, and right there I'm starting to bring up some contrast in the blacks. So that's kind of how I do it. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, because the first thing that I'm going to I'm going to get this lower area exposed, and then I'm going to work on the sky. So let's see. I want it to kind of pop a little bit. I'm going to take the clarity up just a little bit, not too much. Because what happens when you start adding clarity is you start to get some noise. And we can take the vibrancy up a little bit. Okay. Remember, now the next thing, I'm just going to be working here on the ground to start with. So let's see, I'm going to go down to this HSL slider. I quite like working with that. Let's take the saturation, particularly these greens. I want the greens to be really bright and saturated. So I'm going to move the saturation up a little bit on them. And actually, I think they're a little bit yellow, so I'm going to take the hue and I'm going to slide it over to kind of the green scale a little bit. Okay, now the other thing I'm going to do is, these are our highlights up here. I want them to start getting a little bit of color in them. So I'm going to say, give myself, oh God, way too much color. Maybe something more like that. Maybe slide it up just a little bit. Ooh, I think that's looking nice, because it was essentially it looks like it was a morning photo on the ski slopes. Could have been an afternoon. I think morning because of all the mist. Oftentimes you get that nice color in the morning, which might or might not come out in your photograph. Okay, so we have a little bit of color going on in our highlights here. And in our darks, these are our shadows. I think I want a little bit more greens to come out. So that's giving me something to play with a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to take a gradient filter here, and what I want to do is I want to take the sky and make it pop. Okay, now actually before I do that, let me show you what happens here. I'm going to do I want to change the color temperature only. So if I click on the gradient and I click new, then I can go down here and I can kind of let it do only one particular thing. So I'll just say temperature, and it won't change anything else. And I will go back and adjust everything. Okay, so let's slide it right there. Now what I'd like to do, and this is showing me what my mask is because I have it clicked on right here, show selected mask. I'm going to take that off for now. First thing I'm going to do is I really want this area to pop. So I'm going to up the contrast quite a lot. But I want to change, I think I want the temperature to be a little, or I want the tint to be kind of pink. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm playing around with some things that I have some idea of how they work. Now, when you're new to Lightroom, and this is how I did it when I kind of started, I would take a lot of these sliders and slide them back and forth and see what they did. Now I want to try to leapfrog you ahead a little bit by kind of explaining what different things do, but this is a really good way to start learning. One of the things as I'm looking at this photo, I feel like it needs a little bit of help with the composition. I want to accentuate this path here. This path I feel like is kind of focusing our attention down this slope. I'm going to take my tablet over here and I'm going to start working with it. I'm going to take my brush here. And this adjustment brush, I'm just going to say new, and I'm going to do an exposure thing. And I want it to lighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to increase my brush size. And I'm just going to paint make this thing so that it actually pops. And just by doing that a little bit, I'm going to make a nice wide brush. I'm going to just stroke it very gently on, and all of a sudden this path is starting to pop a little bit. And now that I've painted that on, and I can check and see what mask I've put on it, yeah, pretty much that whole area. Now that I painted it on, I can adjust in here the exposure. You don't want it to look too unnatural, but I think that looks quite nice. Now I think our eye is being pulled into this center quite nicely here. While I'm working on this though, let's add a little bit of a vignette, because eventually I will put a little bit of a vignette on, because I think our eyes are going to want to crop into that. Let's also crop it a tad, because I think I want this road right here to be right in the center. Here's the other cool thing. What I'm going to do is right up here along this ridge line, I want to like add some accent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do new. And I want to do a new exposure treatment. I'm going to bring the brush down fairly small. And I'm going to highlight this ridge line, because I think this is a nice little ridge line. So basically you just start painting on it a little bit. So essentially what you're doing here to some degree is you're actually becoming your own painter. I'm going to add a few more stripes right here so that it's focusing our eyes in. So I quite like how that looks as I'm kind of like adding some brush strokes, especially down here on the bottom. Okay, bear with me here. I'm just going to play with this for a second. I think at this stage it's valuable for me to explain that you're kind of painting as you're going through and you're making these photos. There's so much that you can do after the fact, after you take an amazing photo. And that's really what I'm trying to do here. There are a couple composition tips that I did, of course, as I'm trying to direct the eye to one particular place. I'm trying to balance out the lights and the darks. I'm trying to add color. I think the photos that I like to work with work really well when you balance out the reds, the greens, the blues, and the yellows. In this particular case, it's mostly green and mostly kind of an orangey red. So there's not a lot of other color in there, but I think it works okay. I think in this particular photo, we've got a structure here that's hard to tell what it is. And we have this ski slope thing, which is hard to tell what that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it into Photoshop and I'm going to remove those. Now you can actually remove them in Lightroom. Let me just kind of show you what happens and then I will delete it. This right here is your spot removal tool. So if I was to go over this individual thing, and that was to paint it out just with a little bit of room on either side, show you what happens. It basically takes another part of the photo and morphs it over the top of it. Now you can kind of fix the thing if, you know, say I go up here, it's going to take a second, there's a little bit of a lag, and I drag it down so that essentially, and actually I'll drag it up, so essentially the very bottom of it matches up with the very bottom of that. So if I say done, that actually did a pretty good job of morphing out that thing. But the problem is this is a little bit more complicated. It's fairly easy to do in Photoshop. But if I was to drag over this here, while it did kind of do it, and if you're just in Lightroom and you're wanting to like pump through it, add an Instagram photo or something like that, then this is super easy. But I'm going to show you how in Lightroom you can do it with a lot more precision, and nobody will be able to tell that any of those things were in there, and we can take out the lines of the lift and stuff like that. So now all I'm going to do is go up here to Photo. I'm going to say Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so the photo is now here in Photoshop. I can kind of take a look at it. It rendered out everything nicely. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this particular piece. There's a lot of ways you can do this. I like going in and using the clone stamp tool first. And so I'm just gonna go over here. I like to use it on my Wacom. And get my brush to be a little bit big. Hold down the Option key. And let's pick a spot right at the grass line. Now I can kind of match that up by going right there. Okay, let's move ourselves over here to the power lines. So I'm sampling a spot right above it so that it keeps the exposure pretty similar. Okay, now there are a few little aberrations here that I'm also going to spot remove. These are, it looks like little spots on the camera lens, so I'm just gonna go do all that. Okay, here's what I got to work with right at the moment. Now I've removed two little aberrations. I think that looks pretty good. You can't really tell what's going on, it's just clouds. Okay, so now I'm going to just drop in a little silhouette. Just drop it in just like that. A little hiker off in the distance. So what I'm gonna do is multiply that. So, okay, so he's standing, maybe he's just over the hill line though. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to mask out his feet. So what I like to do is I like to click on this little mask button, and then with the white and the black you can paint in a mask on him. So you just use the brush tool, and then we're going to flip a black mask on it, and we're just going to like get him to blend in up there just a little bit. So anyway, there you go. It's not perfect, but I wanted to kind of walk you through basic workflow, how I work with photos, how I'm able to shoot something that looks a little bit like this. The other great thing about doing this is that when I make it, you guys leave great comments down below so that I can see how you guys change up your workflow. I actually think this looks quite nice as a composition, as a photo. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If there's something that you would like for me to work on, maybe you even have a photo, feel free to send me an email. I have the link down below. All right, we'll see you next Tuesday.